What inspired you to start the Good Chocolatier, and how did you come up with the name?
Okay, so the inspiration, I think it was a progression. It was really to start very early in my life. It was just the love of chocolate. And when I came to Canada around 10 years ago, it was my first ever exposure to craft chocolate. And for those of you that don't know what it is, it's the truest and cleanest way to make chocolate, and actually it tastes a lot like the cacao bean. And I know lots of people say the best chocolate is from Switzerland, from Belgium, and I'm from Germany. I should know. Actually, it's not that common. And it took me to come to Canada and meet a French chocolatier who makes craft chocolate to really taste what good chocolate is all about. And I was just blown away, and I was thinking to myself, I need this in my life every single day. And I came here as a student. How do I get to this chocolate? So I asked him to volunteer. And so that's how the journey started, from me exchanging my time for quality craft chocolate on a regular basis. So obviously it's a chocolate business, and that's the product really matters. And the product keeps me excited enough to really dive deep into really what makes a healthy chocolate and all the aspects that are part of it. The business model was also quite important to me. And I think without the inspiration from my then studies about social enterprises, I think I would have never gone into business. I would have just stayed a chocolate lover and eater. So it's really that I learned about different ways how to run a business that are on all levels beneficial to society, plants, people, animals, like just a whole lot. The better, the more the business grows, the better the outcome for the world, kind of thing. It's a concept that was so new to me because I thought businesses always have to take shortcuts for the growth and for the profits. And it was just so inspiring to see there are other business models out there. And chocolate was just, for me, the way to try it out.
Could you expand on what the social enterprise and how you implemented it into your business?
What I studied wasn't directly social work or social enterprising. It was actually community leadership, and more so how to incorporate marginalized groups of society back into society, and even posing question of why are certain people excluded from certain things in our economy and our everyday life. How does this even happen? And then finding ways how to help these people. And it's not just through, I think a lot of it was actually it's non-for-profit work, is going in there to neighborhood houses, asking questions. And through that journey, it was because I was new to Canada, I experienced lots of different groups of communities. And I worked with single moms, with seniors, with low income neighbors, with people on the spectrum, with homeless people. And I really wanted to understand, like, not just one group in particular, but really how that all ties together. And the one thing that was clear to me after a few years is that no matter who these people were, it wasn't really nothing was really based on their skill sets and how they could contribute, but everything was based on what they were lacking, and was often financial resources, and it was often access to a job that would suit their circumstances. And so it was really often related to the job market and how people were hiring, that no matter if you were a single mom or somebody on the spectrum or a senior, just straight off the bat, you don't fit that profile, and you can't work the certain amount of hours and have the same resume even as like a normal person with a good university degree or something like that. It was so fascinating how there was all such different groups of societies, but they seem to struggle with similar things. And when diving deeper and actually asking them about work and reading studies and about that even made locally here, it was often that people wanted to contribute, they wanted to work, they wanted to be part of the economy, and it was actually not pleasant for them to receive freebies, and no matter if it was through government or through non-for-profits. And so then I love work, and I no matter I think in what circumstance I would be, I would think yes, that really gives me meaning and fulfillment. It makes me feel like I'm of something bigger, like it's a way we can contribute, and it's not all just oh work and these people better not have them not work, they will be way better off. Actually, the desire for work is in everyone, and then yeah, just that lack of employment opportunities, and I guess how businesses did not know or did not prioritize adjusting maybe to certain groups' needs. And so when I learned about social enterprise, and there's many ways to explain a bit what they are, and there's no right and wrong. There's so many different models that fall under that category. But where I came from and from what I've done with what I've learned was really the employment-based model. And so they're called employment-based social enterprises, and it's giving people employment that would otherwise have barriers or would not have access to these jobs. To just give you a bit of a different spectrum, because it all the way starts from non-for-profits that do all the social good, but they don't have regular financial income to support these programs. It's often through donations and grants that they can run. And then on the other side, we have regular for-profit business, and you grow and you run your business by selling goods or services. So either of them are great, but regular business doesn't have a very strong ethical mandates, and they don't really have to benefit the community. They're still going to be a great business. And then non-for-profits, I mean, there was a few documentaries I watched and movies I saw, and then even from people I talked to, that it is so great until it isn't, because you have a cause and you pump all of these resources and manpower, and you really want to help out, and you truly do help out. But then either once that problem is solved, or the government steers funding into a different direction, because now suddenly, right, different government, different policies, different budget, they might not have budget anymore. And then what happens to your program is that now these people actually rely on the help that have gotten from you, and suddenly it's no longer there. And that means that sometimes they're worse off than before, because they've learned how it is to actually have this support. And when it falls apart, you've actually haven't taught them how to help themselves, and they start to rely on these organizations. And for me, I think in my ideal world, you always just show somebody the minimal amount needed so they can help themselves and be sustainable and run by themselves, and so that I'm no longer needed, and that is for me a success. And so that is something you can avoid with social enterprises, because now you're in the middle of the two, and you sell goods or services, but you have your main cause and mission is social or environmental in nature. So you're self-sustaining, and there's still great grants or service things available to you, but you're not reliant on them. You can operate independently and sustainably. And so often social enterprises grow maybe a little bit slower, because you have all these other things that are important to you, and it's not just bottom line and profit. All the decisions you're making are based on who's going to benefit. Am I really true to my core mission? Is this helping the people I started off with wanting to help? And does it have any negative implication to either the ethics or environmental mandates that I set for myself in the business? So it might be a bit slower, but I think that's the most sustainable model, and it has a direct impact in the community you operate in, and you see that. And so at the same time, it obviously becomes not just fulfilling for the people that we help, but then also as a business owner, I think seeing the direct impact and not knowing, oh, it's somewhere here in Peru and Ecuador, is like actually I work with the people and I see how they're happy, and I see what they say about their workplace. So it also adds just the extra amount of fulfillment, I think, as well as a business owner.
That's great. So what that essentially sounds like is taking the social enterprise route is more of creating a self-fueling ecosystem. So instead of always being dependent on donations and always having to ask,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to fuel yourself and just kind of keep yourself pushing forward.
Yeah, 100%. I think it still comes down to how to run a business and how to run a successful business, right? And I think that's something that in the non-for-profits, it's more so how do you write successful grants, and you half of your employees might actually be just there to write grants all the time and see what's out there. And so often a lot of the funds that organization receives go straight back to the people that write the grants, and nothing wrong with that. Everyone, right, needs a job and they're so important to that organization, but you're also helping your true cause only so much, because it takes still a lot of effort to even receive this funds. It's really never easy. But as a social enterprise, as a for-profit social enterprise, yes, it's self-fueling, but it's still very much a business. So your product market fit needs to be on point, right? Like your pricing needs to be on point, everything. Like it's still, you have to have the understanding of really what it is that a business is, like, because otherwise your social mission and mandate can overpower your decision making as well, and that might not always help the business growth. But you have to be mindful that the business growth is directly tied into the impact you can make. If you don't make money as the business, then how many people can I hire? And I think in the beginning, I always thought, wow, in 2025, I'm going to hire 30 people on the spectrum and all these employees and help so many people. But to have an employee, like that's a lot of money per month. Like even to be able to pay yourself as a small business is already an achievement. And it really, like, focusing on really how do I make this business a success so I can have the social impact is something that I think needs to be top of mind as well. Because if you're very social ethical at heart, you might always want to like, oh, but I just want to hire another person. Oh, I love this person, but this is my true mission. But your actual finances might suffer because of it. And then nobody is helped. That's definitely the balancing act that needs is on an ongoing basis.
It's almost as if one could have the best of both worlds, and where you're having a social enterprise where it's self-sustaining, you're building a business, hiring people that are needed, but then tap into the positive end of fundraising that the non-for-profits do. Seems like it'd be a best of both worlds, where the non-for-profit funding could help push something a bit further or give a bit more of a longer runway to the business you have that could possibly allow you to hire that extra person to then help that business get to that next level where it could then start generating more revenue and then be able to feed and pay for that person just from the business running itself.
100%. I mean, anyone always needs a little bit of capital support, right? No matter if you get this funding from friends and family or investors or anything, like most food businesses in my world is CPG, consumer packaged goods. They're rarely ever self-funded. And the great thing is now that I have access to funds that are only available generally for non-for-profit and social organizations, but I also can take actual private equity or like personal funding investors. So I can get both, but it's fairly new actually when I started. And I would say probably the first time in 2018 or 19, like a couple of years after I started, I went to Van City, very hopeful. I was like, this is great. I can show you exactly the social impact I'm going to have. And this is the project. And they have this partnership program where, yeah, just for businesses, no, actually not for businesses, that's the clue, for non-for-profits who have an environmental social impact in the community, who can receive funding. If you show, of course, any grant, what's the impact, can you track it, that's what's the proof, and what's the overall strategy here. And I wasn't aware that, like, for-profit funding is not a thing, but apparently non-for-profit funding is. And I showed them, and even if you're a non-for-profit organization, these grants, the grant like givers, they always want to see the sustainability of your project. I'm investing now, but how can we ensure that you're not asking me again next year and the year after, like, actually, I'm giving you this money so you can run yourself? That is also the intent of a non-for-profit grant always. And my sustainability aspect was fantastic, right? I was like, we are selling services, we're selling a good. We only need to set up this project and then it's going to work out. But because our our legal like setup of the of our company is a for-profit, they actually said, no, sorry, there's just only loans. There's only loans for profit businesses. You have to be non-for-profit social enterprise registered in order to access this funding. And that was 2018-19. And then in 2000, I went back to Van City and they changed the rules, and it was suddenly for any social good company as well, because they saw this is actually much better sustainability and ROI on our investment than maybe some other programs. So it's changing as well. And there was a first ever government funded grant that was a Canadian grant that was for profit social enterprises. So it's the concept. I think when I started, there was around like 5,000 social enterprises in Canada. It was a bigger thing in the UK, where also the whole B Corp movement is quite strong and a lot of companies are registered B Corps. It wasn't as popular in Canada, and it's still, right, like some people still, I don't think, know that they exist. But it's good that it's now a bit more recognized by social banks, by the government, and there is other sorts of funding available, and you're not right away put into the for-profit bucket, although you do so much more.
I think that's definitely a good move for the bank to have done that. You did mention a lot about the different demographics that one could help with social enterprise. If you could explain the reason why you ended up going with neurodiversity as the cause you want to tie into your business.
Yeah, I decided to work with adults on the spectrum, neurodiverse adults, people on the autism spectrum, because I was really exposed first time to a community, to a high school that was just for kids on the spectrum throughout my studies. And I worked with multiple groups and a lot of different people throughout my studies, the service learning program. But when it came to actually turning this entire idea into practice in my capstone project, the final project you do at university to wrap up your studies, my initial approach was not really being too set on a certain group of people, because again, like there wasn't a strong tie, and I really just wanted to approach it a bit more objectively based on needs, benefits, and mutual desire to make it work. So I went back to all of the groups I worked with, from homeless people, seniors, went back to all the groups that I was engaged with. And I said, I just pitched my idea. I said, I have this small business that I want to that I'm running. I think I can provide employment to you guys. I don't have a certain job description, and this is what you have to do because I'm just starting, and there's approximately a million things that you could be doing that would be helpful to me. And then see what they said and see how they reacted, and if they were right, like, super, we can do this and that, and this is great. And not a lot of people got back to me at first, or sometimes it was also not a super good fit, right? It was really the approach of like conversation and finding that mutual benefit together, and that was really important to me, because there's building social enterprises from the ground up and from top down, and from top down is generally, hey, I have this job, do this job for me. Or there's asking the questions of, hey, I see like you want to have a job, you have all of these amazing skills. Can you tell me what you love doing, what you're great at? And I can see if that fits into into my company and would benefit us. So it's really just, it's called, in the community space, it's called asset-based community development, and not saying, hey, this is the job with all of these things you have to have. If you don't have them, then that's a lack, and so therefore you're not a good fit. It's really asking, what are your passions? What are your desires? Where do you want to be in life? And actually, that was one of the best things about it, because sometimes, like, even like, when was a homeless person or somebody with autism the last time asked about their dreams and things they're good at and their skills, and like they light up and they like love this question. But it's just that oftentimes we learn to see them as, oh, they're probably not that social, oh, they're probably not this one, they can't. So what we know more about certain groups is the things that are maybe not great at, but we don't know about the individual dreams and skills and things they're so great at. And so it was through multiple conversations. Actually, the director of that high school that I hosted a chocolate making class at, and it was just the sweetest thing I think I've ever done. It's just seeing how different they are and how everyone was. Not everyone was excited actually, but how they're just a different reaction to the process, and that also made me sit back and think, wow, I really know not a lot about autism and how people are. And that's then my personal journey of, oh my God, there's a lot of people that are autistic in this world. How do I not know how to interact with them properly and know how they think? And right, why is it about them to learn my world? Why don't I go in and step and learn about how they how see the world as well? So that was one like thing I was just like super curious about, and it was just such a heartwarming experience. And when I talked to the director there, she said, hey, we have an adult program. I don't think it works for our high school because the kids are quite young. But when they graduate, they go to the adult program if they're not ever going to be living independently and get a regular job and stuff. But they still need a lot of support. There's an adult program. And the first meeting with that director was like, oh my God, Mara, you come at such a perfect time. We have all these barriers to employment that we're trying to overcome, and they come up again and again. And it seems like there's no mutual like adjustment to how to make it work. And so we talked through their challenges. I mentioned all the things that I'm doing right now in the business that are a challenge for me that to maintain because I was a student still, and then obviously needing to work somewhere else and trying to make this work. So it was a lot of things that I potentially wanted to pass on to somebody who does it better than me. And it was through multiple conversations that we found that actually packaging might be the best thing, because food safety, their ability to just focus for hours and do the same thing perfectly, and no matter if it's one thing or the 300s, I would be throwing the chocolate in the corner at that point, because you just do it over and over, and they just love it. Like, they absolutely love it, they thrive in it. And then we had a few, the practice days, me teaching them, and like that's how it evolved. But yeah, so to keep it short or to wrap this up, is that really I was open to a lot of options. What was important to me is that it was really based on mutual benefit, and that they could see that as well. And it wasn't me as a charity giving them stuff. I needed to do something that works for the business, and that would actually be something, again, that they do better than I do, because otherwise I wouldn't hire it out. Like, it still needs to be a very great fit. And I think that's very important to maybe understand for other businesses, that the decisions made are never based from the goodness of my heart and I just want to make it work for them. Of course, that's part of it, and that's part of the mission, but at the end of the day, it only works sustainably if it makes business sense. So since 2018, they've been working. It's like 100% retention rate. They still love it, and they absolutely love the work, and they're always great. There's no bad days where the chocolate doesn't look perfect. It's just they're very consistent and reliable and bring so many great skill sets to work.
I love it. So, if I understand correctly, to sum up the reasons for and what inspired the start of the Good Chocolatier and essentially its growth is, as you just mentioned, there was this need, you having worked with different communities, whether it's elderly, people that are handicapped, people with disabilities, people with autism, you realize, okay, there's something that could be done with what you were learning in school via social enterprise. And then this business in making chocolate, essentially what happened is this perfect unity of the different things you were passionate about and you were interested in just all seemed to work together. And I think the important thing you mentioned when it came to the business aspect of it and hiring people on the spectrum with neurodiversity, with neurodiversion, is it still has to make business sense. It's not a situation of we're
Mm-hmm.
going to bend our rules so much. We do have a certain level of quality we want to have outputted, but it's working with the organization to figure out where in the business would the skills that the organization knows that their people have best would work best within the business. So I think you got that part going. You got the facts of social enterprise where you're tapping into also different sorts of fundings like grants. People think social enterprise, they first thought may think of nonprofits. No, we do care about profit because the profit allows us to live a whole lot longer. So it's also educating people on the difference between a nonprofit and a social enterprise, and the fact you love chocolate at the same time, so you're able to make this product that brings joy to a lot of people's hearts, brings joy to yourself, seems to be a perfect unison. And one could say you started it because you love chocolate, which could have been the initial spark. But what seems to keep you going on this mission is the mission of helping people with neurodiversity, in the fact that proving that social enterprise is this perfect balance of what some people may say is the negative sides of capitalism, that people, companies just care about profit. But in this case, you making more profit in a free market allows you to hire more people with neurodiversity that are otherwise often forgotten in society. And if more businesses capture that practice that you have, I think the issue of people saying free market or capitalism is bad, and then the issue that people with either elderly or homeless or people with disabilities or neurodiversity not getting jobs gets eliminated. It makes this perfect balance of the world of utopia that people are trying to look for, but by
Mm.
running a proper business first is the end of the day is what gets the ball rolling for that.
Yeah, and I would say I came from that side that I thought I want to be 100% on the social side, and there's so much society needs. I want to help out, but and then at the same time I love work. So it's, oh, maybe that is a bit of a conflict. Like you can do a lot of good things by contributing to your life financially and right being part of the economic system. And I think I realized that also the all the non-for-profits combined will probably not solve all the issues that are created by negatively running a business. So if that always continues, we are just trying to always catch up with what's happening in the economy. So solving it from the inside out seemed like the best model to have long-term outcome and long-term success with this as well. And then yeah, I like came to love business and what it means and all the challenges, and I've came to respect it for way more too, and not just see the negatives and just see, oh my God, like this, there's so much more to it. And I just having that understanding, I think on both sides lets you ramp deep in both spaces as well.